Mitchell Barrett stood outside the east corridor of Kensington Palace at 4:30 on a Tuesday afternoon, and something felt wrong. He couldn't name it yet. Just a feeling in his chest that made him look twice at the walls, the doors, the empty hallway that stretched ahead of him. 22 years protecting the royal family had taught him to trust that feeling. The instinct that whispered when danger was close, even when everything looked normal. The palace was quiet, so too quiet maybe. Most of the staff had gone home. The family was supposed to be away for the evening, a charity event in London. Mitchell was pulling the late shift, which meant walking the empty halls and checking rooms that nobody else would see until morning. Standard protocol, nothing unusual about that, except for the feeling in his chest that wouldn't go away. He moved it down the corridor, his shoes barely making a sound on the polished floor. The winter sun was already setting outside, throwing long shadows. Through the tall windows, everything looked exactly as it should. Clean, organized, perfect. But that feeling stayed with him, growing stronger with every step. Before we continue, make sure you hit subscribe on Royal Guard Files. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We share these untold stories from inside the palace walls every single day. Now, back to what Mitchell was about to discover. He reached the section of the East Wing that housed storage rooms and old offices. Rooms that hadn't been used in months, maybe years. The palace had more space than anyone could keep track of. Closets that turned into forgotten archives. Sitting rooms that became dumping grounds for furniture nobody wanted, but nobody could throw away. Mitchell's job was to check them all, even the ones that seemed pointless. That's when he heard it. Faint. So faint he almost convinced himself he'd imagined it. A sound coming from somewhere ahead. Not a creak or a settling pipe. Something else. Mitchell stopped walking. He held his breath and listened. There. Again. Softer than a whisper, but unmistakably real. A child's voice. His training kicked in before his mind could fully process what he'd heard. Mitchell moved forward, faster now, his eyes scanning every door he passed. The sound was coming from the right side of the corridor, from one of the storage rooms that should have been empty. He counted the doors as he moved. First room, nothing. Second room, nothing. Third room, and there it was again. Clearer this time. Definitely a child. Definitely distressed. Mitchell reached for the door handle, but his hand stopped in midair. The door had been sealed. Not locked, sealed. Heavy plastic sheeting covered the entire frame, industrial tape running along every edge. Someone had gone to serious effort to close this room off completely. A small printed sign hung at eye level. Renovations in progress. Do not enter. Authorized personnel only. But there was no renovation. Crew. No equipment. No dust or noise that would suggest construction work. Just silence. And behind that sealed door, the sound of someone crying. Mitchell pressed his ear against the plastic sheeting. The crying was clearer now. Young, frightened, and unmistakably familiar. His blood went cold as recognition hit him like a physical blow. He knew that voice. He'd heard it hundreds of times over the past 3 years, at birthday parties, during garden walks, in the hallways when she was running to find her parents. Princess Charlotte. The next 10 seconds moved in slow motion and lightning speed at the same time. Mitchell ripped the plastic sheeting away from the doorframe. Not caring about the noise or the protocol he was breaking. His hands found the door handle and twisted hard. Locked. Of course it was locked. He stepped back, his mind racing through options. Radio for backup. Find a key. Follow proper procedure. But every second he spent thinking was another second that child was trapped inside, and the crying was getting weaker now, more desperate. He made his decision. Mitchell raised his boot and slammed it into the door just below the handle. Once, twice. The wood cracked but held. He hit it again, putting his full weight behind the kick. The lock mechanism gave way with a sharp snap, and the door swung inward. The room beyond was dark. Heavy curtains covered the windows, blocking out what little daylight remained. Mitchell fumbled for the light switch, his heart hammering against his ribs. The overhead bulb flickered once, twice, then held. And there, in the far corner of what should have been an empty storage room, he saw her. Charlotte sat on the floor, her back pressed against the wall, her arms wrapped around her knees. Her face was tear-streaked and pale. Her school uniform was wrinkled and dirty. She looked up at Mitchell with eyes that were too wide, too frightened, too exhausted for a 9-year-old child. Mitchell crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to one knee beside her. His hands shook as he checked her over for injuries. No blood, no obvious wounds. But she was trembling, and her breathing came in short, shallow gasps. How long had she been in here? The room was cold, freezing actually. The heating had been turned off, probably when the room was sealed. Charlotte's fingers were nearly blue. "Your Royal Highness," Mitchell kept his voice steady, calm, everything he wasn't feeling inside. "I've got you. You're safe now. Can you tell me what happened?" Charlotte's mouth moved, but no sound came out at first. She tried again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I heard them talking, in Grandmother's study. I wasn't supposed to be there. I was looking for George, but they didn't know I was behind the curtain." Mitchell wanted to ask who they were, what she'd heard, but Charlotte was shivering so hard her teeth chattered. First things first. He stripped off his uniform jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. It swallowed her small frame completely. She grabbed onto the fabric like it was a lifeline. "Someone came in after they left," Charlotte continued, the words spilling out now in a rush. "A man I didn't know. He found me before I could leave. He didn't hurt me, but he brought me here. He said I had to stay quiet, that it was for my own protection, that he'd come back soon. But he didn't come back. Nobody came back. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. I called for help, but nobody heard me." Mitchell's mind was already racing ahead, calculating timelines and possibilities. The family was supposed to be at that charity event. Someone had made sure Charlotte didn't make it there. Someone had sealed her in this room deliberately. And if someone had gone to that much trouble to hide her, they'd notice very quickly that she'd been found. He reached for his radio, but Charlotte's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone so small and scared. "Please don't," she whispered. "Not yet. They'll know. The man said if anyone found out I was here, it would be worse for everyone. He said people were listening. That's why he took my phone. That's why he sealed the room. So nobody would hear me even if I screamed." Mitchell looked into her eyes and saw something that made his stomach turn. Real terror. This wasn't a child who'd gotten lost or locked in by accident. This was a child who believed her life depended on staying hidden. And that belief had come from somewhere. He thought about the sealed door, the official-looking sign, the professional job someone had done, making this room disappear from the daily patrol routes. This wasn't improvised. This was planned, which meant whoever was behind it had resources, access, and time to prepare. Mitchell didn't know how deep this went, but he knew enough to understand that calling it in right now might make things worse before they got better. But he also knew he couldn't leave. Charlotte in this room 1 second longer. She needed heat, water, medical attention, and her parents, in that order. Mitchell made his choice based on the only thing that mattered in this moment. The child in front of him was cold, scared, and in danger. Everything else could wait. "All right," he said quietly. "We're going to do this differently. I'm going to get you somewhere warm and safe first. Then we're going to figure out who did this. But right now, I need you to trust me. Can you walk?" Charlotte nodded. Mitchell helped her to her feet. She swayed slightly, unsteady after hours of sitting in one position. He steadied her with one hand while his mind mapped out the fastest route to his quarters. The guard residences were technically off limits to family members without escort, which made them perfect right now. Nobody would think to look for Charlotte there. They moved toward the door, Mitchell keeping Charlotte close to his side. He paused at the threshold, listening for footsteps or voices in the corridor beyond. Nothing, but that didn't mean they were alone. The palace had eyes everywhere. Cameras, staff members, other guards who might report what they saw without understanding the danger. Mitchell pulled Charlotte back for a moment. "When we leave this room, I need you to stay right beside me. If anyone sees us, you're not Princess Charlotte right now. You're my niece visiting for the afternoon. Can you do that?" Charlotte looked up at him with those wide, frightened eyes. Then something shifted in her expression, a spark of determination that reminded Mitchell exactly whose daughter she was. This child had William's steel beneath Kate's grace. She straightened her shoulders, wiped her face with the sleeve of Mitchell's jacket, and nodded once. They stepped into the corridor. Mitchell moved quickly, but not frantically. Running would draw attention. Walking too slowly would give someone time to intercept them. He kept his pace steady and purposeful, the pace of a guard going about his normal duties. Charlotte matched his stride, her small hand gripping his. The east wing felt longer than it had 20 minutes ago. Every corner could hide someone watching. Every shadow could conceal a threat. Mitchell's eyes swept continuously, checking ahead, checking behind, calculating their next move if someone appeared. They passed the sealed room, its torn plastic sheeting now evidence of what had just happened. Whoever had put Charlotte in there would know very soon that she was gone. They were halfway to the guard quarters when Mitchell heard voices approaching from around the next corner. Male voices. 2 of them, maybe 3, talking in low tones that carried just far enough for Mitchell to catch fragments. Something about schedules, something about security protocols. Could be innocent, could be the people looking for Charlotte. There was no time to turn back. The corridor behind them was empty and exposed. Going forward meant passing, whoever was coming. Mitchell made a split-second decision. He steered Charlotte toward a small alcove that housed a marble bust of some long-dead royal ancestor. It wasn't much cover, but it would do. He positioned himself between Charlotte and the corridor, his body blocking her from view. The voices grew louder. Footsteps echoed on the polished floor. 3 men rounded the corner, all wearing palace security uniforms. Mitchell recognized 2 of them, Carson and Webb. Good men, generally. Competent guards who'd been here longer than Mitchell. The 3rd man he didn't know. Younger, sharp eyes that swept the corridor with practiced efficiency. Carson saw Mitchell and nodded. "Barrett, didn't expect to see anyone in this section. Thought you were covering the west entrance." Mitchell kept his voice casual. "Schedule shift, covering the internal patrols tonight. Everything quiet on your end?" "Quiet as a tomb," Webb replied. Then his gaze shifted slightly, noticing the alcove behind. "Mitchell, you checking the storage areas? Heard some of them are getting renovated." The question hung in the air like a trap. Mitchell knew these men were watching him carefully now, looking for anything unusual, any sign that something was wrong. He also knew that Charlotte was pressed against the wall behind him, holding her breath, trusting him to keep her safe. Mitchell shrugged. "Just routine. You know how it is. Check every door, every room, even the ones nobody uses." The 3rd man, the one Mitchell didn't recognize, spoke for the first time. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Find anything interesting?" There it was, the real question. Mitchell met the man's eyes and saw something cold looking back at him. This wasn't casual conversation anymore. This was a test. And the wrong answer would trigger consequences Mitchell couldn't predict. "Nothing worth reporting," Mitchell said. He kept his tone bored, uninterested. Just another guard finishing another tedious patrol. "Unless You want a full inventory of broken furniture and old paintings. Riveting stuff. The tension stretched for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Then Carson laughed, breaking the spell. That's the job, isn't it? 99% boredom, 1% terror. Come on, we've got to finish the perimeter check before shift change. The three men moved past Mitchell, their footsteps fading down the corridor. Mitchell didn't move until he heard them turn the corner and disappear. Then he let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Charlotte emerged from the alcove, her face even paler than before. "That third man," she whispered. "I've seen him before. He was outside grandmother's study, right before the man took me." Mitchell's jaw tightened. So they were actively looking for her, or at least watching for any sign that she'd been found. Which meant the clock was ticking faster than he'd thought. They needed to get off these corridors and into a secure location. Now. They moved again, faster this time. Mitchell took a different route, using the service hallways that staff used to move through the palace unseen. These corridors were narrower, less grand, lit by harsh fluorescent bulbs instead of crystal chandeliers, but they were also less monitored. Fewer cameras, fewer people who might ask questions. Charlotte stumbled once, her exhaustion catching up with her. Mitchell caught her before she fell, then made another quick decision. He couldn't have her collapsing in a hallway where anyone might see. He lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her small body nearly weightless against his chest. She didn't protest, just wrapped her arms around his neck and let her head rest against his shoulder. They reached the guard residential wing 5 minutes later. Mitchell used his key card to access the secure door, then carried Charlotte down a short hallway to his own quarters. Small apartment, bedroom, bathroom, and a combined living space that doubled as everything else. Not fancy, but it was warm and private, and, most importantly, off the official patrol routes. Mitchell set Charlotte down on the small couch and immediately turned up the heating. She was still shivering, still too cold. He grabbed a blanket from his bedroom and wrapped it around her, then filled a glass with water from the kitchen tap. Charlotte drank it in desperate gulps, like she'd been dying of thirst. "When did you last eat?" Mitchell asked. Charlotte thought about it. "Breakfast. Before school." Mitchell checked his watch. 5:30 now. She'd been trapped in that room for hours, possibly since early afternoon, based on her story. No food, no water, freezing cold, and scared out of her mind. The fury that rose in Mitchell's chest was cold and controlled, but it was there. Someone was going to answer for this. Once Charlotte was safe, once her parents knew what had happened, someone was going to pay, but first, food. Mitchell didn't have much in his small kitchen. Some bread, some cheese, apples. He made Charlotte a simple sandwich and watched her eat it with the focused intensity of genuine hunger. The color was starting to return to her cheeks. The shivering was easing. She was going to be okay. Physically, at least. Emotionally was another question. Mitchell had seen enough trauma to know that the real damage often showed up later, days or weeks after the immediate danger had passed. Charlotte was holding herself together right now through sheer willpower, but she was 9 years old. 9. And someone had deliberately terrorized her. Charlotte finished the sandwich and looked up at Mitchell. "What do we do now?" That was the question, wasn't it? Mitchell sat down in the chair across from her and thought about his options. He could call it in now. Get palace security involved. Contact William and Kate immediately. That was protocol. That was what he should do. But Charlotte's warning echoed in his mind. The man said, "People were listening." Mitchell weighed his options carefully. If someone inside the palace had orchestrated Charlotte's disappearance, then going through official channels might alert them before he could get her to safety. But keeping her hidden meant delaying the moment when her parents found out she was alive and unhurt. That was a different kind of cruelty, and Mitchell hated it. Yet Charlotte's fear was real. Her warning about people listening came from something she'd overheard, something serious enough that someone had locked her away to keep her silent. He needed more information. Charlotte, Mitchell kept his voice gentle but direct. I know you're scared, but I need you to tell me exactly what you heard in that study. Everything you can remember. It might help me figure out who we can trust. Charlotte pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Her eyes went distant, like she was looking at something far away. It was Grandmother Camilla's study. I was looking for George because he'd taken my book. I thought he might be hiding there. The door was open just a little bit, so I went in. But then I heard people coming, and I didn't want to get in trouble for being somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, so I hid behind the curtain. Mitchell nodded, encouraging her to continue. His mind was already analyzing what she was telling him. Camilla's private study. Not a public room. Not somewhere staff would casually wander. Whoever Charlotte had heard was meeting there deliberately, in a space they believed was secure. There were 3 people, Charlotte said. Grandmother Camilla was one of them. I recognized her voice. The other 2 were men. I didn't recognize them. One had an accent. Scottish, maybe. The other sounded older. His voice was rough, like Grandpa's gets when he's been talking a long time. Mitchell felt something cold settle in his stomach. Camilla. He'd been hoping Charlotte would say she'd overheard staff members or visiting dignitaries, anyone but immediate family. This complicated everything in ways he didn't want to think about yet. What were they talking about? He asked. Charlotte's hands twisted in the blanket. The older man said something about documents, papers that needed to disappear before anyone asked questions. Grandmother said she'd already handled it, that the room was sealed and nobody would check it until after New Year. That gave them 6 weeks. The Scottish man asked about me. He said my name. He said, "What if the girl heard something?" And Grandmother laughed. Not a nice laugh. She said I was at school where I belonged, and even if I had heard something, nobody would believe a child's story over hers. Mitchell's hands clenched into fists. He forced them to relax. Getting angry wouldn't help Charlotte right now, but the picture she was painting was damning. Camilla, the queen consort, involved in something serious enough that they needed to destroy evidence and dismiss witnesses, and they'd been confident enough to discuss it openly, never imagining that Charlotte was in the room with them. Then what happened? Mitchell prompted. I stayed quiet until they left. I waited a long time to make sure they were really gone. When I came out from behind the curtain, there was a man standing by the door. Not one of the men from the meeting. Someone different. He had dark hair and a security uniform. He looked surprised to see me. He asked what I was doing there. I told him I was looking for my brother. He asked if I'd heard anything. I said no, but I don't think he believed me. Charlotte's voice dropped even lower. He made a phone call. I couldn't hear who he was talking to, but afterward, he told me there was a security issue, and I needed to come with him for my own protection. He was very polite about it. He didn't grab me or hurt me, but when I asked to call my parents, he said the phones weren't secure, that we needed to keep me safe until the situation was resolved. He brought me to that room and told me to wait. He said someone would come for me soon. Then he locked the door. I heard him putting something over it. And then nothing. Just silence. I called for help, but the walls are so thick. Nobody heard me until you did. Mitchell processed this information rapidly. A security guard acting on orders. That meant someone had made a phone call and given instructions to contain Charlotte immediately. Someone with enough authority that a guard would follow those orders without question. The chain of command in palace security was clear. Only a handful of people could give orders like that. And if Camilla was involved, she'd have the access and the authority to make it happen. But this was still speculation. Dangerous speculation that could ruin lives if Mitchell was wrong. He needed proof, or at least corroboration, and he needed to get Charlotte somewhere safer than his quarters. If they'd been looking for her in the corridors, they'd eventually expand their search. The guard residential wing wouldn't stay secure forever. Mitchell made his decision. There was one person in the palace he trusted absolutely, someone who'd served the family for 40 years and had earned a reputation for integrity that nobody questioned. Harrison Vale, senior guard captain, Mitchell's mentor when he'd first joined the Royal Protection Service. If anyone could help navigate this situation without triggering whatever trap had been set, it was Vale. "I need to make a phone call," Mitchell told Charlotte, "to someone I trust, someone who can help us, but I'm going to do it from my personal mobile, not the palace line, and I'm going to put it on speaker so you can hear everything that's said. Is that all right?" Charlotte nodded. Mitchell pulled out his phone and dialed Vale's number. It rang 4 times before the older man answered, his voice gruff and tired. "Barrett, this better be important. I'm off duty and halfway through a decent meal for the first time this week." "Sir, I need you to listen carefully and not react," Mitchell said. "I'm in my quarters. I'm not alone, and we have a situation that requires your immediate attention, but it needs to stay between us for now. Can you come here without telling anyone where you're going?" There was a long pause. Mitchell could almost hear Vale's mind working through the implications of that request. When the older man spoke again, his voice had changed. Alert. Focused. "Give me 10 minutes. Don't open the door for anyone but me. 2 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Got it?" "Got it. Thank you, sir." Mitchell ended the call and looked at Charlotte. "Captain Vale is one of the best men I know. He's going to help us figure this out. But while we wait, I need you to think about whether there's anything else you remember. Any other details about what you heard or saw. Even small things might matter." Charlotte thought about it, her young face serious with concentration. The Scottish man mentioned a date. He said everything needed to be finished before the 28th. That was important because of some meeting. They kept saying the meeting couldn't happen if the documents still existed. The 28th? Mitchell glanced at the calendar on his wall. Today was the 22nd. 6 days. Whatever was happening, it was on a tight timeline. That explained the urgency. That explained why they'd been willing to lock Charlotte away, rather than risk her talking to the wrong person. The minutes dragged past. Mitchell kept checking his watch, his nerves stretched tight. Charlotte sat quietly on the couch, exhausted but alert. She'd been through something that would traumatize most adults, but she was holding steady. Mitchell admired that. This child had backbone. 2 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Mitchell moved to the door and opened it carefully. Vale stepped inside, his weathered face showing no emotion until he saw Charlotte on the couch. Then his eyes went wide, and something like fury flashed across his features before he controlled it. "Your Royal Highness," Vale's voice was gentle, despite the anger Mitchell could see simmering beneath the surface. "We've been looking for you. Half the palace is in an uproar. Your parents are frantic." Charlotte's face crumpled. "They know I'm missing?" "They got back from the event early. You weren't with the group that was supposed to accompany you. Your protection officer said you never made it to the car. Your phone's location went dead around 2 o'clock this afternoon. Every available guard has been searching for 6 hours." Vale looked at Mitchell. "Where did you find her?" Mitchell explained. "The sealed room. Charlotte's story about what she'd overheard. The guard who'd locked her in. The men in the corridor who might have been watching for signs she'd been found." Vale listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with every detail. When Mitchell finished, Vale was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his own phone and made a call. "This is Captain Vale. I need you to pull security footage for the East Wing corridor between noon and 3 o'clock this afternoon. Specifically, the storage room area. Yes, I know it's sealed for renovation. That's why I need the footage, and I need you to do this without logging the request through normal channels. Personal favor. I'll explain later. He ended the call and looked at Mitchell. I have someone in surveillance who owes me. He'll pull the footage without flagging it in the system. If there's evidence of who took Charlotte to that room, we'll have it within the hour. But we have a more immediate problem. Her parents need to know she's safe. And that can't wait for proof or investigations or anything else. They're terrified right now. We need to get Charlotte to them. Mitchell understood the logic, but something about it felt wrong. If Camilla was involved, and if she had enough influence to order a security guard to lock Charlotte away, then bringing Charlotte out of hiding would alert everyone involved that their plan had failed. They'd have time to destroy evidence, coordinate stories, make the whole thing disappear. Charlotte's testimony would be dismissed as a child's confused memory. The guard who'd locked her in would vanish or claim he was following protocol for some imagined threat. And whoever was behind this would walk away clean. But Vale was right about one thing. William and Kate deserved to know their daughter was alive and safe. Every minute they spent believing she might be hurt, or worse, was a minute of unnecessary agony. Mitchell couldn't justify extending that pain, no matter what strategic advantage it might provide. There's a way to do both, Charlotte said suddenly. Both men looked at her. She sat up straighter, her voice gaining confidence. We tell my parents I'm safe, but we tell them privately, not through official channels. Can you get a message to my father without everyone knowing? Vale considered this. Your father's in the family quarters with your mother. There's always security outside their door, but I know the guard's on duty tonight. I can get a message to him directly. Ask him to come here instead of raising an alarm. But once he knows you're safe, Charlotte, he's going to want to know who did this. And that's going to trigger an investigation, whether we're ready for it or not. My father will listen, Charlotte said with quiet certainty. If I ask him to wait, if I explain what I heard, he'll want to do this right. He won't let anyone get away with this. Mitchell saw Vale's expression soften slightly. The old guard captain had known William since he was a boy. There was trust there, deep trust built over decades of service. If anyone could navigate this situation with the delicacy it required, it was Vale working directly with William. All right, Vale said. Here's what we're going to do. Mitchell, you stay here with Charlotte. Keep the door locked. Don't open it for anyone but me or Prince William. I'm going to the family quarters now. I'll tell William his daughter is safe and bring him back here personally. Once he's heard Charlotte's story, we'll decide our next move together. But from this moment forward, this situation is contained. We don't trust anyone outside this room until we know exactly what we're dealing with. Mitchell nodded. Vale moved toward the door, then paused and looked back at Charlotte. Your Royal Highness, you did exactly the right thing staying quiet until Barrett found you. You're safe now, and I promise you, whoever did this is going to answer for it. Charlotte managed a small smile. Thank you, Captain Vale. After Vale left, Mitchell locked the door and returned to his chair. Charlotte was fading now, the adrenaline that had kept her alert finally wearing off. Her eyelids drooped. Her head nodded forward. Mitchell grabbed a pillow from his bedroom and helped her stretch out on the couch. She was asleep. Within seconds, her breathing deep and even. Mitchell stood watch, his mind racing through scenarios and possibilities. He thought about Camilla in her study, confident and cold, discussing documents that needed to disappear. He thought about the Scottish man and the older man with the rough voice. Anonymous figures in a conspiracy that reached high enough to threaten a princess. He thought about the guard who'd locked Charlotte away with polite efficiency, just following orders from someone with authority. And he thought about what would happen when William arrived. When a father who'd spent 6 hours believing his daughter might be dead, learned that she'd been deliberately hidden away by people inside his own family's household, that anger, that fury, that pain turning into action, it was going to reshape something fundamental in the palace. Mitchell could feel it coming like a storm on the horizon. He didn't know it yet, but that storm would break within the hour. And when it did, nothing about the royal family's carefully maintained image would ever be quite the same. 23 minutes later, 2 knocks, a pause, then 3 knocks sounded at Mitchell's door. He moved quickly, checking through the peephole before unlocking it. Vale stood in the hallway with Prince William behind him. William's face was pale, his expression caught somewhere between relief and barely controlled fury. The moment the door opened, his eyes found Charlotte asleep on the couch, and something in his posture crumpled. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and dropped to his knees beside the couch. His hand reached out, trembling slightly, and touched Charlotte's shoulder with the gentleness of a father who'd believed he might never touch his child again. She stirred, her eyes opening slowly. For a moment she looked confused, still caught between sleep and waking. Then she saw her father, and everything she'd been holding inside broke free. "Papa," she whispered, and then she was crying. Not the scared, helpless crying from earlier. This was different. The release of terror held too long. The safety of knowing someone who loved her was finally there. William wrapped her in his arms and held her like he'd never let go, his own eyes wet as he pressed his face against her hair. Mitchell turned away, giving them privacy in a moment that belonged only to them. Vale stood by the door, his weathered face carefully neutral, but Mitchell could see the emotion there. 40 years protecting this family meant moments like this hit harder than they should. Professional distance only went so far when you'd watched children grow up and knew their parents' hearts. William finally pulled back enough to look at Charlotte's face. His hands cupped her cheeks gently, his thumbs wiping away tears. "Are you hurt? Did anyone hurt you?" "I'm okay," Charlotte managed. "I was scared, so scared. But Mitchell found me. He got me out." William looked over his shoulder at Mitchell, and the gratitude in his eyes was almost painful to witness. "Captain Vale told me some of what happened, but I need to hear it from you, sweetheart. All of it. Everything you can remember." Charlotte told her story again. This time with her father's arms around her, she found details she hadn't remembered before. Small things, important things. She described the Scottish man's appearance. Tall, red hair going grey, a scar on his left hand she'd noticed when he was holding papers. The older man never showed his face fully, staying in shadow near the window, but his voice had been distinctive. Educated accent, upper class. Someone used to being obeyed. And Camilla's words, cold and certain, about documents that needed to disappear and a meeting on the 28th that couldn't happen if evidence still existed. William's expression darkened with each detail. Mitchell watched calculation move behind the prince's eyes. William wasn't just a father in this moment. He was someone who'd spent his entire life learning how power worked inside the monarchy. Someone who understood palace politics and the dangerous games people played with crowns and influence as their prizes. When Charlotte finished, William was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Vale. "The surveillance footage. You have someone pulling it." "Should have it within 20 minutes, Vale confirmed, without logging the request officially. Once we see who took Charlotte to that room, we'll have something concrete." "And if the footage shows what I think it's going to show?" William's voice was flat, dangerous. "If this goes as high as Charlotte's story suggests." Vale met his eyes steadily. "Then we handle it carefully, with evidence that can't be dismissed or explained away, with witnesses who can't be intimidated into silence, and with you deciding how this plays out, because it's your family and your decision." William nodded slowly. He looked at Mitchell. "You found her. You kept her safe. You called for help instead of going through channels that might have alerted the wrong people. That took instinct and courage, Guard Barrett. I won't forget it." Mitchell kept his voice professional. "Just doing my duty, sir. Princess Charlotte's safety is the priority." "It's more than duty," William said quietly. "You trusted your gut when something felt wrong. You broke protocol when protocol would have cost time. You made decisions that put my daughter's well-being above everything else. That's not just duty, that's character." Before Mitchell could respond, Vale's phone buzzed. The captain checked it, his expression sharpening. "Footage is ready. My contact sent it to a secure server. We can view it here if you have a laptop." Mitchell provided his personal laptop. Vale pulled up the footage, and they gathered around the small screen. Charlotte stayed on the couch, not wanting to see the moment she'd been taken. William sat beside her, one arm around her shoulders while he watched the screen, with Mitchell and Vale standing behind him. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Timestamp showed 1:30 in the afternoon. Charlotte emerged from Camilla's study, looking around nervously. She started walking toward the main corridor, moving quickly, like she wanted to get away from that area. Then a figure in a security uniform appeared from a side hallway. Tall, dark-haired, moving with purpose. He intercepted Charlotte, spoke to her briefly. Even without audio, they could see Charlotte's hesitation, her uncertainty. The guard gestured, explaining something, made a phone call while Charlotte waited, then took her arm gently and led her toward the east wing. "I know him," Vale said, his voice tight. "That's Thomas Rutherford. Been with Palace Security for 8 years. Good record, no complaints, always followed orders exactly." He paused. Maybe too exactly. The kind of man who'd do what he was told without asking questions. They watched Rutherford lead Charlotte to the storage room, watched him unlock the door, usher her inside, lock it behind her. Then he pulled out industrial plastic sheeting and tape from a maintenance closet 3 doors down. Someone had prepared materials in advance. Someone had planned this. Rutherford sealed the door with efficient, practiced movements, hung the renovation sign, checked his work, then walked away, pulling out his phone again as he went. "Can we track his phone records?" William asked. His voice was controlled, but Mitchell could hear the anger underneath. Cold fury that came from watching your child be locked away like a problem that needed solving. "With proper authorization, yes," Vale said. "But that authorization would have to come through official channels, which means people asking questions, which means whoever's behind this would know we're investigating." William stood abruptly, pacing to the small window, his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried absolute authority. "My daughter was imprisoned in a sealed room for hours because she overheard something she wasn't supposed to hear. Someone in this family, someone with power and access, ordered it done. That person needs to believe they got away with it for 6 more days. Until this meeting on the 28th happens. Until whatever documents they're trying to hide get used or destroyed. Because that's when we'll have them. Not on a child's testimony that can be dismissed. Not on security footage that shows a guard following orders, but on whatever crime they're trying to commit." He turned back to face them. "Charlotte stays officially missing until tomorrow morning, long enough that whoever took her believes the plan worked, that she's somewhere hidden and helpless, that they have time to proceed. Then tomorrow, Charlotte is discovered in a part of the palace she wandered into by accident. Confused, dehydrated, but safe. A door that locked behind her. A terrible accident. Everyone relieved. No one to blame. No scandal." Mitchell understood immediately. Give the conspirators confidence. Let them proceed with their plan. Meanwhile, build a real case with evidence that couldn't be denied. It was strategic and cold and absolutely necessary if they wanted justice instead of just temporary safety. But Charlotte shook her head. "Mama, I want Mama. She's scared. She thinks I'm hurt or worse. I can't let her think that any longer." William's expression softened. He returned to the couch and knelt in front of his daughter. "You're right. Your mother needs to know you're safe. But Charlotte, if we tell everyone you're found, if we make this public, whoever did this will destroy evidence. They'll create stories. They'll have lawyers and protection and the weight of the monarchy behind them. And it will be your word against theirs. Do you understand what I'm saying? Charlotte looked at her father with those serious eyes that seemed too old for 9 years. You want to catch them, not just stop them. Catch them. Yes, she thought about it. Mitchell watched her process the implications, saw her understand what her father was asking. One more night of staying hidden, one more night of her mother's terror. But the chance to make sure whoever had done this faced real consequences. It was an impossible choice to ask a child to make. But Charlotte wasn't thinking like a child anymore. She was thinking like someone who'd seen the worst of people and wanted justice. Mama can know, Charlotte said finally. Tell her privately, like you came to me. But everyone else thinks I'm still missing. Just until you catch them. Can you do that? William pulled her into another embrace. I can do that. And Charlotte, you won't be alone tonight. You'll stay here with Guard Barrett. He's proven he'll protect you with his life if necessary. I trust him completely. Your mother and I will be one corridor away. If you need us, we'll come. Immediately. This will be over tomorrow. You have my word. Mitchell felt the weight of that trust settle onto his shoulders. Protecting Charlotte for one night shouldn't have been daunting. He'd protected royals in genuine danger before. Threats from outside forces. Credible risks from people with weapons and plans. But this was different. This threat came from inside, from people with access and authority. People who could walk freely through the palace while Mitchell had to keep a 9-year-old hidden in quarters that weren't designed for security. Vale seemed to read his thoughts. I'll have trusted men on every corridor approach, people I've served with for decades. They'll know Charlotte's in the residential wing, but not which quarters. Anyone trying to reach this area will be stopped and questioned. Between now and tomorrow morning, this becomes the most secure location in the palace. William stood, his jaw set with determination. I'm going to my wife now. She needs to know. Our daughter is alive. Then I'm going to have a very careful conversation with my father. Because whatever's happening involves his wife, and he deserves to know before this explodes tomorrow. After that, I'm going to place calls to people I trust, people who can help when this comes out. Lawyers, advisors, security specialists who work outside palace channels. By the time we reveal Charlotte tomorrow, we'll have a strategy in place. And whoever thought they could harm my child to cover up their crimes will discover exactly what that mistake costs. He looked at Charlotte one more time. I love you. I'm so proud of how brave you've been. This is almost over. I love you too, Papa. Tell Mama I'm okay. Tell her I'm not scared anymore. After William and Vale left, Mitchell found himself alone with Charlotte again. She was exhausted, running on empty, but sleep seemed impossible now. Too much had happened. Too much emotion and fear and relief crashing together in waves. Mitchell made her hot chocolate from a packet he found in his cupboard. Not fancy, but warm and sweet. Charlotte sipped it slowly, curled up under the blanket. Guard Barrett, she said quietly. What you did today, breaking that door, getting me out, not trusting the normal rules. My father's right. That took courage. Thank you. Mitchell sat down in his chair. Your Royal Highness, I'm just glad I trusted my instincts. That feeling that something was wrong. If I'd ignored it, if I'd finished my patrol without checking that room thoroughly. He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. They both knew how differently this could have ended. Will they really be punished? Charlotte asked. The people who did this? Or will they make it go away? Like things always get made to go away? It was a cynical question from someone so young. Mitchell hated that she had to ask it. Hated that she'd learned lessons about power and protection that children shouldn't know. But he also respected her enough to answer honestly. I think your father will make sure there are consequences. Real ones. He's not going to let this disappear quietly. Not when it's about you. Not when someone crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. Charlotte nodded, accepting this. She finished her hot chocolate and set the mug aside. Sleep was finally claiming her, pulling her down into rest she desperately needed. Within minutes, she was breathing deeply, her young face peaceful in a way it hadn't been since Mitchell found her. He covered her with the blanket and settled in for a long night of standing watch. Hours passed quietly. Mitchell stayed alert, listening for any sound in the corridor outside. Vale's promised security was invisible, but present. Twice, Mitchell heard voices outside, heard them being turned away politely but firmly. The residential wing was locked down tight. Nobody was reaching Charlotte tonight. Dawn came slowly, grey light filtering through the small window. Charlotte woke as the sun rose, looking around in momentary confusion before memory returned. Mitchell had already prepared breakfast. More simple food, but she ate it gratefully. Then they waited. At 8:30, the knock came. William's pattern this time. Mitchell opened the door to find the prince dressed formally, his expression composed, but his eyes showing the strain of a sleepless night. Behind him, Kate stood with tears already streaming down her face. She pushed past protocol and propriety, rushing to Charlotte and sweeping her daughter into an embrace that spoke of every parent's worst nightmare ending in relief. William watched his wife and daughter, then looked at Mitchell. It's time. Vale has arranged for Charlotte to be officially discovered in the North Library. A maintenance worker doing morning rounds will find her. She'll be confused, dehydrated, unsure how she got there. The palace doctor will examine her. A simple accident, a terrible scare. And while everyone's focused on relief and celebration, we'll be gathering evidence. By the time the 28th arrives, we'll be ready. Mitchell nodded. His part in this story was essentially over. He'd found Charlotte. He'd kept her safe. Now the complicated work of justice would proceed through channels he couldn't access. But he'd done what mattered most. A child who'd been imprisoned and terrified was now safe in her mother's arms. Everything else was secondary to that single fact. 3 weeks later, Mitchell received a private summons to William's office. When he arrived, he found the prince alone, sitting behind a desk covered in documents. William gestured for Mitchell to sit, then pushed a sealed envelope across the desk. "Open it," William said. Inside was a handwritten letter from Charlotte, thanking him, telling him she was okay, sharing that the people responsible had been dealt with quietly but firmly. Certain individuals were no longer part of palace life. Certain positions had been restructured, security, protocols had been overhauled, and most importantly, she felt safe again. "The details can't be made public," William said. "Too many reputations at stake. Too much damage to the institution if the full story came out. But Charlotte wanted you to know that what happened led to real change, real consequences. Not perfect justice, maybe, but accountability where it mattered." Mitchell folded the letter carefully. "And Princess Charlotte? How is she really?" "Stronger than I expected. Therapy is helping. She's back at school, back with her brothers, back to her normal routine. She still has nightmares sometimes, but she's healing because of you, because you listened to your instincts and broke down a door when it mattered." William stood, offering his hand. Mitchell stood as well, shaking it. "I won't forget what you did, Guard Barrett. Neither will my family." If this story showed you something about Royal Guards you didn't know, make sure you're subscribed to Royal Guard Files. We share these untold stories from inside the palace every single day. Drop a comment and tell us, if you were in Mitchell's position, would you have followed protocol or trusted your gut? We'll see you in the next one.